So, hello and welcome to the New Gig podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Hodgson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by research scholar at Yale University, Kenzo Soares Seto. How are you doing, Kenzo?
Hi, Glenn. It's really nice to be here, and expect that our discussion today is going to really help all the workers that have some kind of anxiety with the impacts of AI in their work in the near future.
Excellent. Well, let's begin by you just giving a bit of background on yourself and a little bit about your personal journey that you've taken so far.
So I'm right now the majority award fellow at Yale Law School at the INSP, the Information Society Project. And my research is mostly about AI governance in the majority world, especially in Latin America. So how governments like Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, and Mexico, they are right now creating their laws and their legal frameworks about AI, especially about how AI and its effects on the labor debate, on the labor conditions for workers, how our companies, universities, and governments are adopting AI and are also developing AI in these countries. And the reason that I'm researching this is because I'm from Brazil. I'm a Brazilian journalist, actually, although I'm now in a law school. But that's because I have my PhD was in Brazil, in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, in the Communication Media Studies Department, but it was specifically about the regulation governance of digital markets, especially about digital platforms. And when we're talking about platforms, again, specifically about label platforms. So most of our listeners are going to think about Uber, but I was researching specifically how communication jobs like journalism and content production, like a podcast, like this
Yeah.
one that right now, were affected by the platformization of the communication and media markets. So that's why in my career, in my path, I went from communication to legal studies about digital markets. And also, and to conclude, this is important, beyond academia and scholarship, I worked for more than 10 years as a policy advisor in Brazilian National Congress. So I
Excellent.
came from a real world policy making experience, and then I went to academia to think how my experience could help me understand better with the theoretical debate and the critical debate, this new challenge that we have about technology and work.
Yeah, and it really is a challenge, as you say there, Kenzo. And I mean, given your research and your sort of overview of the reality on the ground, what are some of the trends and themes that you're observing in the real world in terms of changes in the labor market that AI and technology are bringing about?
So I think the first thing it's really interesting. It's that we have an imaginary this before technology actually changes how people work. We already have this anxiety that thinks about that frames AI as this great replacement of workers.
Hmm.
So I have some research with thousands of workers across Europe and North America, and now we're starting to do the same research on the global South that reviews how the majority of workers are afraid that they're going to lose their jobs because of AI. And
Yeah.
in reality, when we see the data that is covering right now, we can talk about the future, but right now, we don't have actually, when we think about the job market in general, a huge impact of AI. What is happening is that sometimes when companies lay off their workers, they justify these layoffs talking about AI and especially AI investment, but there's
Right.
no actual empirical data that it's because of AI. It's more a speech, it's more a discourse from companies than the rethink. But of course, at the same time, in some specific job markets, especially tech workers, so we're talking about data scientists, software engineers,
Yeah.
developers. In this specific scenario, it will already have massive layoffs because what the technology is doing is that the seniors workers they have a huge increase in their productivity and they don't demand anymore the assistance of junior positions of
Yeah.
junior workers. So this is a real trouble. So this is one thing. The other thing is that more than actually completely automation, what we have is AI reorganizing and changing the way that people work in a more abroad, in a more general dimension that is across all industries and all labor markets. So we are talking about sometimes a huge increase of productivity, of course, but also new liabilities.
Yeah.
So there is a huge field of study about AI failure, how sometimes companies are even the companies that lay off their workers then have to rehire them again because they realize that the kind of trouble that they are having, because chatbots they hallucinate when they are talking with consumers. But the
Yeah.
consumers take as granted what the chatbot, official channel from the company told them. So sometimes, some consumer has some kind of complaint, and the chatbot says, "You are absolutely right. We are going to give your money back." But that was not the policy from the company. But now, I mean, if you go to a judge, the judge is going to say, "Okay, but you made a promise. Don't matter if it was the AI chatbot." And we
Yeah.
have some more serious issues. Sometimes we have machines in the health and hospital context that during really critical surgery they have glitches because all machines have glitches,
Yeah.
but we're talking about a machine that stopped working properly during a real high risk health procedure. So this is the kind of risks that we are talking about it for example. And we also have the debate about sensitive data. So how all our data is now becoming part of these model trainings, and we're talking about workers who use cameras over their heads when they are in factories or even when they are washing laundry or washing
Right.
anything in their homes.
Mm.
And finally, we have to talk about and we can explore this more in the next the moments. But we need to talk about the unequal effects of AI when we consider the difference between the global South and the global North, when we
Right.
consider even Europe compared to China and the US and to America, and about gender, racial, and class difference about how AI affects. Because I'm going to conclude with this. Sometimes the same tech, the same AI solution has completely different effects when it's being applied in different moments of the chain of production, in different
Hmm.
contexts, labor contexts.
Yeah. This is really interesting. Could we go a little bit deeper into that? Because this is not something I'm particularly aware of, and I'm sure our viewers and listeners, the majority of them, aren't aware of this kind of differentiation and alternative outcomes that we're seeing from the use of the same technology.
So let me give you one example. We sometimes we can talk about wearable AI solutions.
Yeah.
So now, but the most common thing that people can think about is glasses, right? You have
Yeah.
glasses with AI, but in the industrial, in factories, it's go a little beyond that. So we're talking about sensors that you use in your body that helps you, like with augmented reality, to visualize the process. Anyway, so when I talk about more white collar positions like engineers, managers, these help them had better comprehension of the whole systems that they administrate or they develop. And in some cases, this can help, including their autonomy, because now they can make decisions in a faster way. But the
Mm.
same variable, when it's applied for in the production line, when we're talking about blue collar positions, for example, in the cars industry, in the automobile industry. Um, we are talking about more anxiety in this worker because it's another level of vigilance about
Yeah.
the way that people are controlling his work. And also, this blue collar worker has more, it's more afraid that he's just training the machine that's going to substitute him. And
Yeah.
that's not as common when we're talking about engineers. I mean, right now it's increasing, but the same technology, we're talking about glasses in this example.
Mm,
For the guy in the factory line, it's an instrument of surveillance. For the guy in the office, it's a creative tool that it's making his worker more interesting and even more productive.
mm. Wow, this is really interesting things as well. And I mean, so that when we're thinking of this in terms of the future of work itself, as individuals, what should we be doing, Kenzo? How can we kind of future-proof ourselves? How can we make sure that we're not made obsolete by the technology? How do we sort of get ourselves in sync with the revolution or the evolution that's underway, so that we can actually thrive from this new environment as opposed to be sidelined or even replaced?
Perfect. So first, I think we need to shift the way that we frame AI and work from this perspective of it's inevitable. We're going to everything is going to become automation can substitute every position, and
Yeah,
everybody probably already tried to say what's the probability of your position being substituted in the near future, like in 5 years by some robot, some AI. And what we are actually realizing through research is that AI adoption in real world work cases, it's always about collective bargain. It's about how the different stakeholders decide together, sometimes through negotiation, sometimes through conflict, through struggle, how AI is being adopted. So one thing that we all can do as workers is to push for our voices to be heard, to be listened through the process of building AI policies in your organizations, in your
yeah,
companies, in your universities, in the government. So I'm just not talking about like advocacy. It's really important for workers to think about what are the positions, the propositions for the legal debates that are happening right now all across every nation in the world. But we are also talking about the specific AI policies in your companies. So this is really important. We already have labor struggles, like the most famous was the Hollywood's writers and actors strike 3 years ago, and it was the first strike ever to achieve a labor agreement that had specifically agreements about AI adoption in this industry. So some examples of what the actors and writers they achieved. They achieved for what we are calling the three C's, like consentment, compensation. So what this means? So if some product of my work is going to be used to train AI, I need to be informed about it. I need to give
yeah,
my explicit consentment, and I need to know how I'm going to be compensated about it. So if you're talking about creative workers, we're talking about sometimes copyrights, right? And
mm,
we are talking about that you're talking about future proof. So our agreements need to be future proof. So for example, even if I allow it for my I mean, I'm a designer. That something that I had made is going to be used by a training model. I need to think about the ways that maybe it's going to be used in 10 years. And
yeah,
nowadays we have no idea, and I need to have the right in the future to deny and to delete my worker from these databases. So this is one thing that's really important. How we can, as individuals, but also as a collective force
yeah,
to shape and to challenge AI policy. That's what we are calling AI policy from below, from the workers,
yeah,
or even better, worker-led AI governance. This is
yeah.
one part. The other part is about education. We can talk more later.
Yeah, but I like this idea of actually worker-led policy, but also worker-led design as well, so that workers have this skin in the game and input into the technology. So it's not just something that's actually placed on top of them, but it's something that is actually sort of they're co-creating in that sense.
Exactly. So part of my research in Brazil was about tech workers who actually develop AI in Brazil. So it's a really interesting scenario because
Yeah,
sometimes people think that the countries in the global south, they only contribute through data workers,
yeah,
and that's not true. But the thing is, the specific kinds of AI tools and systems that are developing in a country like Brazil, we do have some large language models that were trained in Portuguese because
yeah,
Brazil is one of the few countries that speak Portuguese. So we
yeah.
need to develop our own models. But anyway, but mostly of the investment in Brazil is going to go to the core markets of our economy, that is commodities production. So we're
Yeah.
talking about AI, computational vision to identify plagues and diseases in your crops. No, like soybeans,
Mm.
sugarcane. We're talking about AI models to optimize the oil and gas extraction by Brazilian oil and gas companies. So anyway, in these specific conditions, what we see is that tech workers are some of the best to understand the risks, the bias, and the social consequences of the technologies that they develop. So, and sometimes they also the technology they adapt to. So I will give you one concrete example.
Yeah.
We had some tech workers who are adapting automatic content filters from a specific social media platform for the Brazilian market. Because again, we speak Portuguese, so we needed
Yes.
to develop the bots that would identify sensitive content in Portuguese.
Mm.
And what they realized is that this platform, that was a non-Western platform, I cannot say more because all of them they sign NDAs, so
Of
it's kind.
course. Yeah.
Anyway, there's no Western platform. Identify as sensitive content that should be banned LGBTQ content. We're
Yeah.
not talking about like explicit sex or anything. We're just talking about people defending LGBTQ. Like we are in the Pride Month, for example,
Yeah.
and this kind of content was being censorship by this non-Western platform. And the tech workers from Brazil said, in Brazil, this is illegal. You can't do that. You know, we're not going. They deny to develop this specific tool, and this is another really important thing: the right to deny the use of AI or the development of dangerous AI. So this
Yeah.
is new dimension of worker struggle that it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we're seeing some very good specific themes. I think that it's great that you're highlighting these as well, specific initiatives in Brazil. I've come across the EcoSol initiative and some of the cooperative movements in Brazil as well, Kenzo. Can you say a little bit about this? How is this also playing out in the job market and the view towards AI and its adoption?
So there is this the debate that we are trying to map and understand that sometimes we call like AI otherwise or solidarity AI to think how we can not just have negative from the perspective on AI, like oh AI is dangerous, AI is going to is a, it's a challenge to the workers
Yeah.
or to labor. But what can we think in a positive perspective about other ways to develop AI? So we have more than 10 years of this really interesting movement that's called platform cooperativism, where we have co-ops, tech co-workers co-ops, for example, developing platforms that was alternatives to give fair work conditions and for like drivers. When we think about Uber, we have actually really successful examples of drivers apps that in Brazil. I will give you one example. In
Yeah.
Brazil, we have this public app in Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro, it's my It's where I was born, so I'm really proud about this one. So
Mm.
anyway, Rio de Janeiro has a municipality app for drivers and for people who want to hide, so it's a direct competition to Uber, where the drivers earns 100% of all their gains. So you as a user, you pay to go from Copacabana to Ipanema. 100% of what you're paying actually go to the
Gotcha.
worker, but it's a
Yeah.
public platform. So this kind of so the thing is that we must recognize that we're talking about this diversity of initiatives. So
Mm.
some of the platforms are going to be co-ops, but some of them are going to be public in the sense of state-owned platforms.
Yeah.
Others to be developed by grassroots non-profit organizations. So to broaden this perspective, we start talking about digital solidarity economy. What's
Yeah.
solidarity economy? Solidarity economy is this field of all different initiatives that are based to not about making profit, but about improving the life of their communities. So we are talking about, for example, community banks. And in North America, the most close thing would be because most of these experiences are from the global south, but they're like credit unions. But in the sense that sometimes we talk about, we call social currency. So this idea that you have a specific currency that circulates in a neighborhood, especially in a poor neighborhood, in a slang, in a favela, as we say in Brazil.
Yeah.
The a part of the revenue that is made by the workers and the local commerce of this community stay in the community through the use of the solidarity networkers. So we're talking about integration. For example, we have huge agribusiness co-ops in Brazil, and they need software because all companies right now need, they are in the process of their digital transformation. So how
Yes.
can we think about solidarity ecosystems where these huge agribusiness companies, when they are hiring, they are adopting AI solutions, they buy from tech workers co-ops. So we're talking about ecosystems, not just specific isolated cases. So one
Yeah.
example about how this AI solidarity actually works is that we have an Argentinian initiative that's really interesting that is called AI for Co-ops by Co-ops. So we're talking
Okay.
about Tech Workers Federation of Co-ops developing AI solution for other co-ops in the most different markets. And another example we have in Europe, Transcribus. Transcribus is a AI solution for digitalizing and computational vision applied for documents. It already have scanned millions of documents,
Yeah.
and it was completely developed by a co-op of librarians because it was really interesting because it was in the beginning about how you can digitalize rare documents like from 200, 300 years
Yeah. Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
And also,
Protection. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a specific niche like manuscripts and
Mm.
scrolls. And and it's a co-op of individuals like librarians and about universities. So it's a network of European universities with funding from the European Union. So it's a really
Okay.
interesting. That's another thing that we should talk about it. Public policies for these alternatives because
Yeah.
big tech are heavily funded by states like the US. So the alternative must need public procurement, also need public investment. But anyway, Transcribo, it's a real example where if you use it today, and you can try, all our listeners can try right now, it's
Mm.
online, you can also become part of the co-op. And you're going to have yeah, all the rights that the other members have. So this is another example of AI experimentation in the perspective of more than profits, actually improving people's lives, including workers.
That's fantastic. You know, it's a really great examples, I think, of how these things can be moved forward. And it's not just a case of it's not a linear process that I think we sometimes in the narrative, Kenzo, it's put across that this is something that's just going to happen. We're kind of like bystanders. We're watching the process. But the reality is we have a lot of agency. We can actually control this and have our inputs. And I think the realization for this is something that's very important and very new, shall we say?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The main thing is about agency. That's the
Yeah.
thing. we all have agents over how AI is going to be developed, adopted, and especially how the states should think about their AI policies.
Yeah.
That's a thing. It's not just about few companies from the US or now China that have
Yeah.
all the power to define the future. And also, I think it's about to think these agents as solidarities. So how we can think about federations, how we can think about what's the role of unions, but also these other ways to organize that are beyond unions, because that's a real challenge. Like
Yeah.
when I'm researching tech workers, especially in Brazil, they hate unions because the traditional unions have no idea how to organize people who, for
Yeah.
example, are in remote positions. But we can organize people together about AI rights and AI policies beyond these traditional and sometimes I would say legacy frameworks.
Absolutely. And how is this working? Because we've seen sort of in the European context, there's the European AI Act trying to put some sort of framework in place, some rules of the road, some policy to actually shape what actually happens. Are we seeing sort of similar things in, I mean, you're focusing very much in sort of the global South and South America specifically within this. Are we seeing similar initiatives to pull this forward?
Yeah, European Union had a really important role through the debate about what we call a risks approach. So the idea that the regulation should be proportional to the level of risks that the AI offer to the users and to society in general as a whole. Just a moment, Glenn. I don't know if I lost you, if I
No,
lost my.
I'm still here. It's just the picture as
No problem.
slightly. I think it's probably sort of like a camera issue or battery issue, but yeah, please keep going, Kenzo.
Okay, my audio is okay. Okay, perfect. So, European Union has this really important role about introducing, at least in the legal debate, in the actual public policy arena space, this concept of what you call the risks approach. So,
Yeah,
we are going to regulate AI solutions in a proportional way to the level of danger that it offers society. And the idea is because we all have this traditional perspective that we need to balance innovation and the precautional and the dangers that innovation can offer society. But we have a more deeper challenge to Europe that for the first time in many centuries Europe is in the digital market, some kind of it's understanding that it also become in some sort of way a periphery of the world, a peripheral region
yeah,
compared to US and China. So what for Latin Americans like me, it's not news. For
yes,
Europeans, it is. So
yeah,
there is
yeah,
this political economy challenge that even if we talk before AI, if we talk about platforms, so the last technological and economic cycle, Europe was, sorry, even
yep,
if we talk about the last economic and technological cycle, the platformization of society, Europe was already behind. Just think how many European platforms you use in your everyday life or in your work.
yeah,
So I think that this means that Europe must think how to answer to this economic challenge, how to foster innovation, not from a standalone position. One
yeah,
thing that I think is really interesting, it's when we think about the European Union and the Mercosur, the common market of South America,
yes,
agreement, free trade agreement. What's going to be the impacts of this free trade agreement between Europe and South America when we think about data markets and digital policy and AI development? So I think this is one thing that we should pay more attention in the next months and the next years. What kind of global alliances we can see. And when we're talking about global alliances, not from the point of view just about states, but even
yeah,
thinking about workers all across Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Africa. This is one thing that we must think about because for many years, Europe was considering that its role in the digital market is what we call the Brussels effect, right? So
Yes.
the unified European market, it's so relevant that the companies that are not born and are not located in Europe are going to need to adapt to our rules. But after the new US administration, the rules of the game has changed. I
Very
think
much
every
so.
town
Yeah.
in the world is realizing that we are going to need to have more levels of digital sovereignty because the instability of the global geopolitical context right now reveals how fragile, how dependent we are from other countries when we think about the not just AI but any digital chain of production. And now we are in a geopolitical context, and that offers more risk in the near future, and it reveals how we are completely dependent on infrastructures that we don't own as
Yeah.
society, also as nations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are things are fascinating and really look forward to your forthcoming book as well, Kenzo, which is coming out in the near future, which will be diving more deeply into these topics. And it's fantastic to have these conversations, and we really want to get you back on again to discuss these themes as we look at this evolution that's happening in the world of work. And it's not going to slow down anytime soon. So your work is absolutely essential here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So we are. I'm writing this book with my colleague, Professor Rafael Groman from University of Toronto, and it's we finish the book next August, and then when I know when it's going to be in the bookstores and the platforms, I can tell our listeners. And anyway, what I think it's important. To mention about the European context is European workers. They are in a specific interesting position to challenge and to think about AI development because I was talking about the European challenge and the European
Yeah,
technological dependence on US and Chinese infrastructures and companies. But at the same time, the whole co-op ecosystem that I was talking before that is really strong in Europe. Europe has one of the most interesting examples of platform co-ops, of data centers co-ops. This is really interesting because we're
excellent.
talking about alternatives in every different level of the chain of production of AI. So it's important to think that about data centers and clouds and sovereign clouds. So where we host our data, and I think this is I give the example of transcribables, but we could talk more about the different platforms. Like we have hailing apps in all across Europe, like the I don't remember the name quite now. Oh, bike co-ops that it's a hailing co-op across, I think, 12 different European countries right now.
Yeah,
And just to finish with this, beyond Europe, I think in Latin America and the Global South, I just organized a webinar about AI governance in Africa last month. It's to think about how the technology that we develop also reflects the values of our societies. This is really
yeah,
important. You know, so
yeah,
Europeans always talk about European values, and we also thinking so one example, just to give you one example. When we talk about data subjects, when talking about like European legal frameworks like the GPDR, African scholars were saying that the way that African philosophy, African cosmovision, and the African society traditional values and traditional knowledge think about subjects, it's completely different from European traditions because we cannot think about individuals in the African tradition without thinking about their deep connections to communities.
yeah,
So this really interesting how we should talk about collective rights to data and not just about privacy and other individual rights to data. So
Yeah.
when we go back to think about AI and the labor market and or AI and the work, we sometimes we think about privacy and how we should have the right to deny these AI companies to use our data, but another debates about how can we as a society innovate and use the data that we generate. So to give you one example, we are thinking about all the health data that is collected through these wearable things that we use like watches, like the smart watches.
Yeah.
Our public health systems should have access to, of course, anonymized process to all this data. Now, and when we think like how we can optimize our public health systems using this kind of data, or when we think about all the data that Uber collects about the mobility and the traffic in your cities, shouldn't our municipalities should have access, free access to this data that we as citizens generate? So how or what are also the opportunities for public solutions using AI in education, health systems, and smart cities, but from the point of view of citizens and workers? That's another thing that I think it's also interesting to us to think about it.
Yeah, well, it is, Kenzo. So many issues, fantastic. Sadly, we're running out of time here, but we could have follow-ups on this. There's so many important topics, and thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity, and thank you for all our listeners. And if you want to know a little more about our research, there are some websites where we're tracking all the workers across the world initiatives about shaping AI policies through strikes, through collective bargain, through advocacy, manifestos, open letters. And I can share the link with you, Glenn, and
Please
maybe
do.
are going to access it and even start their own movements about how they shape AI policy in their
Fantastic.
organizations and companies. That's it. Thanks, Glenn, again for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir.